Good evening, everyone. I'm John OLoughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And tonight, I think we had our signals crossed a little bit. I apologize, but I think we had not gotten straight with Garland Nixon, so he is probably having some family affair going on or doing something for Memorial Day, and we wish him well. And so I thought I'd just check in with you on my own and say, how are you? And wish you a happy and meaningful Memorial Day as you think about the sacrifices of people who gave their lives in past wars and otherwise, so that we could keep our freedoms. And it's in their name as much as anything else that we have that we must keep going. We must carry the torch. It's our turn. And this is what we try to do, to try to repay that unpayable burden, that privilege that we have to breathe free and do as we please, within reasonable bounds. And that's why I really think my dad's story is something that needs to be told. It's kind of a sad story, but it's a story about somebody that started out in life to do everything he possibly could for his country, for his community, for his church, for his family, for everything that he loved as he grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. And as he got opportunities, he excelled at it. When he was given an opportunity to go to the rather exclusive Loomis School in Windsor, Connecticut, he took up the challenge and did well there, and then won a full scholarship to Harvard. And it was not an athletic scholarship, although he was quite a meaningful asset to a football team or a track and field team. He was also enough of a scholar that he got his scholarship based on academic merit. I think that was the time when when James B. Conant, the whatever you call the president of Harvard, was canceling the academic scholarships and favoring, the academic side. Well, anyway, and then he did achieve success at Harvard, and both as a scholar and an athlete. But he was in the class of 1942. So the thing to do, of course, was to join the military and fight for your country, which he immediately did. Went to ROTC classes in Harvard. They let them graduate a little bit early so he could enter into the midshipman school, the U.S. Navy Reserve Midshipman School at Columbia University in New York City, of course, where he was appointed the regimental commander of about 1,000 young officer candidates. They were midshipmen, is what they were enlisted as. And he graduated from that in February of 43, and was assigned to one of the most important ships in World War II, the USS Nashville. And the Nashville was a light cruiser that became General Douglas MacArthur's flagship from the island hopping campaign from New Guinea, New Britain, and then up through the islands to the great landing at Leyte Gulf. And lo and behold, we have a picture of my father standing on the bridge of the Nashville. That's not the Nashville. That might be a later Nashville, but that's not it. No, Andy, that Ixnay on the Ongray Asheville nay. Okay?
What the hell is this?
Well, it's not important. I'm just telling the story. All right, settle down, Andy. Don't get carried away. You see, ship names pass through different vessels over history. It was in Nashville in the Confederate Navy, believe it or not. Um,
Really?
yeah, and they do because you don't want to give up a good name. So that's a subsequent Nashville you probably hit. If you search, you can find Nashville. What you have to do if you want to find it is put CL-43. Okay, because that's the number of the ship that was in World War II.
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh my geez, I didn't know you could hear me. I'm sorry.
No, I hear you very well. Yeah,
Okay.
everybody else does too.
I'm logging out then. I apologize. Apparently I never logged out.
Oh, well, anyway, if you want to show the real Nashville, the CL-43, that would be fine. So that's my dad's ship. And after World War II, he went to law school and then joined the FBI, where he rose to some prominence of importance with J. Edgar Hoover. We're not exactly sure what his relationship was, other than that it was obvious that he was one of the agents that was considered very, very competent, very reliable, a real straight shooter, as he has been called. So from there, he was recruited by the Kennedy administration after the Bay of Pigs, when Kennedy decided to take special operations back away from the CIA and park it in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where they, as the Defense Department, would be responsible for special operations, with a few small exceptions, but generally the entire special operations world that had been built by Allen Dulles and Richard Bissell was being taken away from them and given to a new office called SACSA, SACSA. And SACSA's initials stand for the Special Assistant for, what is it? Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency and Special Activities. And it was filled by a Marine General, General Victor Krulak. And my dad worked for General Krulak after he transferred to the Pentagon at the request of the Kennedy administration. And there is where his final career of about 10 years was, until he died in 1971 on June the 6th. And that 50th anniversary is coming up on Sunday. So that's what I'll be doing this weekend. We'll be broadcasting on StreamYard here with Andy for a lot of the weekend. So just stay tuned to our channel here and keep in touch with Neighborhood News Studio. And I always post everything on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. So we'll be working on the book from now to then. Andy will be down here on Mystery Island helping me finalize the layout and put in the images that we need to choose. So, but I think we're going to have a nice product by the time of Sunday, the 6th of June, to share with people. And so that's what we're up to here at Mystery Island Studio. Haven't been on the YouTube very much, and that's because I've been spending all of my energy writing, or perhaps distracting myself from writing, one or the other, for the past nearly a month now. And it's difficult, but it's finally starting to feel rewarding as I've printed out what I have so far. And I know that when Andy gets here, we're going to put together a nice publication for everyone. So I'm looking forward to that, and to those people that are able to come on Sunday the 6th at the event. If you want to know more information about that, then do get in touch with me at koproductionsusa@gmail.com, or actually you can just go to screamingospreys.com and send me a note there. That goes right straight through to my email. So anyway, let me know if you're interested. Have a limited ability to because of the size of the place and the restrictions. But we want to accommodate everyone if you can. Yeah, just send me a message on that form. Thanks, Andy. Well, so this was what brings me to something I wanted to talk to you about tonight. All right, Andy. Andy's had a long day. He's been working with George Webb all day, and then he had to drive home. So we forgive Andy. He's a hardworking trooper, and we love him. So thanks, Andy. Pardon me a second. All right, just got a little note from Garland. He said he apologizes. He's out with the family and forgot about this being a Monday. So anyway, that gives me a chance to talk to you guys. I haven't had a McDuff's Minefields in too long, and I really do miss sharing my thoughts with you about various subjects related to what's really going on in the world, whether it's from the history I study with my dad or the history of the country or things generally, or current events and politics, the insanity of the past election, and the politics now is just so far away from reality that I hardly even take the time to look at it. I realize a lot of people are very upset and up in arms about the possibility of war, and I'm not there. I think so much of what we are exposed to, if we look at the mainstream news, is there to psychologically affect us in some way, you know, to give us some type of emotional charge that is not really based in facts, to apply the lessons that they've learned from the work of people like Lippmann and Bernays, these people that come from a Freudian background, which honestly is pretty bleak when it comes to any spiritual side of mankind. It's extremely bleak, and it fits very well with the what they call the empiricists, the British empiricists, that basically are you could also think of them as bean counters, right? The people that if you don't put a certain number up on the board, then you're not going to pass. You're not going to make it, and so you'll be deprived of the essence of what you need, whether it's health care or good food or a healthy environment. You'll have to work yourself to death at a young age, and that's be unfortunate, but that's empiricism, because that definitely, you can always go back to the old book of James, I think, where he says, where it's quoted saying Jesus says that poor will always be with us, and some people kind of take that to extreme and saying, well, we can just exploit them then, can't we? No, I don't think that's what Jesus was saying. Well, here's what I wanted to talk about tonight. It is definitely tied very tightly into my dad's career, and that means I've been studying it lately. And I think it's worth concentrating on exactly what is the word counterinsurgency. What does it actually mean? Now, as I said, SACSA was the vehicle by which President Kennedy intended to control special operations. He liked special operations. He and Bobby were like, yeah, man, let's get all these special, helicopters and snake eaters, and really, let's use covert operations to save lives of people that otherwise would have to fight the big war. You know, that was how they were going to solve the problems of third world conflict, was to use what they called counterinsurgency. So here's what I think has been done, and I wouldn't be surprised if this wasn't done cleverly by the same CIA folks that were exploiting people like my dad, during his lifetime, and other, so many other people that they just would use and discard when they're done with. And I'm sorry to say that. I know most of the CIA folks are great folks, and I don't mean to, but this is not something that's really debatable, that these things did happen, and who knows whether they're not still happening. It's a cruel world when it comes down to it. The facade we see with the politics and the screaming and everything, well, this is nothing compared to what really goes on behind the scenes as you study things like counterinsurgency. So here's the quiz. What does counterinsurgency mean in your mind? What do you think counterinsurgency means? Because it's essential that we thresh this out. And I'm saying this in response to a question that Professor Hamamoto raised last Thursday. He said, how did Victor Krulak learn counterinsurgency? He said he must have been in the Philippines because they were doing a lot of that there. But I can't account for Krulak being in the Philippines. I mean, not after World War II. He was probably there during the war, but not as somebody that's running counterinsurgency operations, okay? So I've been thinking about that. How indeed did Victor Krulak learn about counterinsurgency? And let's see. Here's a few answers. Let's have a look. Big topic for tonight. Yeah, it is. Well, we'll give it a few minutes. Think about it. Squashing of dissidents. Let them come in. The counter, kind of not proactive. Military officers in America and France starting to push back against leftist agenda. Counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency. Rome, Robert Kovacs says. Okay. So I think that the tone of the word counterinsurgency now is very, very negative. And what has happened is that the counterinsurgency operations that we know about are these really crazy, drastic, awful things, like taking a North Vietnamese prisoner, that's been captured, and trying to turn him into a double agent, and then dropping him in a nighttime helicopter drop, called a halo, a high altitude, low opening, where you're supposed to, wait till you get almost to the ground and then pop the thing open, and doing that at night. And these guys were supposed to, sometimes run a little radio station or try to propagandize among the people in North Vietnam. And that was crazy. And the guys that they sent up there, good guys, bad guys, they all either died or got flipped by the North Vietnamese. It was terrible. But also we had the fast boats that were attacking North Vietnam along the coast and on their coastal islands, and just trying to blow things up and cause military reactions, and that's the kind of thing that led to the supposed Gulf of Tonkin resolution. So, all right, all of that stuff, sneaking into the village and killing somebody with a knife at night, and all of that really creepy stuff that we think of when we think of counterinsurgency is not what Victor Krulak was teaching. And it was his doctrine that was consistent with what President Kennedy had promised to do in his inaugural address. And that is not to try to control or own the people of the former colonies in the world, such as the French colonies in Southeast Asia, not to try to control them and, to financially rip them off and to, confine them into low-paying jobs, or to use them as slave labor, or to steal their land or their resources. No, Kennedy was seriously intending to help them build their own economies and support their own ways of life, whatever that might be. And in Vietnam, it was Krulak's passion to do just that. In other words, to win the hearts and minds of the people in the countryside that grew the rice and provided the food for the cities, and to take care of their family structures and to not to disturb the 1,000 years of history and heritage of the people that live there, but to provide them with security and a sense of safety, and to help them find food when food was scarce, and perhaps to help them with some technical stuff, but not to try to run their country. And that stands out to me here on Memorial Day, because people died for that principle, the principle of actual, real counterinsurgency, which really is the challenge faced by a government when there is a rebellion. You need to counter the insurgents. So if the Viet Cong or the NVA were insurgents, then it's not a party from another country that's going to save the government. The government of South Vietnam had to save itself. And it was Krulak's intention to help them. And the efforts of so many of these special forces operatives were to train, and not to fly the combat missions themselves, but to turn out really good Vietnamese pilots, and to supplement what they could do, but not to take over the war. That was what Kennedy's style of counterinsurgency was. And another very important person that I've just been reading about, and I want to tell you a little bit about this man. His name is Heine Adderholt, and here's a book written by Warren Trest, Air Commando One by Heine Adderholt and America's Secret Air Wars. And I was amazed as I read through this. Heine Adderholt was associated with a number of secret operations. He was the head of the first Air Commandos that was formed in 1962, I think, to fulfill President Kennedy's desire for a special ops force in the Air Force, which they really hadn't had before because the CIA was doing all that stuff. Well, now he's the guy that becomes the head of these air commandos. And everywhere you look in this book, he is confronted by the people that want to simply come in and bomb the heck out of everywhere, to bomb, to bring in, like Westmoreland ended up doing, to fight the big ground war, in which we ended up by 1968 of having well over 500,000 American combat and related personnel in Vietnam, fighting against what was by then a determined and quite capable enemy. And that didn't have to happen. And this is what Heine Adderholt, who's actually, although his nickname is Heine, he's not German. He's actually from Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama. And the more I read about him, the more I like him. He was very vociferous in saying that we need to win this war by helping the Vietnamese people win the war. And that means that we're going to bring them food and we're going to provide them with security. And that kind of counterinsurgency was swept away after President Kennedy was killed. And under President Johnson, I mean, you can picture President Johnson with a pair of 45s, 6 guns on each hip, and wearing his big Stetson white Texas cowboy hat, and that's the style of war that he wanted to fight. He wanted to come in guns blazing and just wipe them out. Just wipe them out. Wherever they are, just go find them, kill them, and wipe them out. And so that's what they tried to do. And that's why they had to send 500,000 young Americans over there to fight against a phantom that they could never catch. And it was because they were trying to run a control war, a war that really turned into the Phoenix program, as we've read all about with Doug Valentine's great book. So the whole approach to the indigenous people under Kennedy was the same approach that Saxa was taking under Victor Krulak. And that was the same approach that the air commandos were taking under Heine Adderholt. And that was the same approach that my father would have taken. And I'm sure that that was a problem that was never solved. I remember my dad talking about a warship called a plane called the A-10, the Warthog, and how useful that was. And the problem was that Saxa was trying to fight that little small war and use propeller planes, for pinprick strikes, and it was useful to have these smaller but highly armored planes that could fly low and provide close infantry support. But the generals like Anthus and LeMay and of course Johnson himself, as well as McNamara, they all disdained the counterinsurgency idea. It was just not interesting to them. All they wanted to do was bring in, the big guys, the B-52s, the divisions, the Big Red One, all of the great weapons of American arsenal. They wanted to bring them into that war, and they did, and they lost it. But as we look back at that era, as my dad was right in the middle of these terribly difficult decisions that people were making, I think it's important that we understand that the JFK people didn't disappear when President Kennedy was murdered. They didn't disappear. The people, maybe they didn't love Jack Kennedy. Maybe they didn't like him at all, but he was the president. And people in my dad's position would have known that it was a coup. And that meant that they had violated the Constitution, which people like my dad took very seriously, that had sworn to uphold, protect, and defend. So that is how we get to an amazing discovery like the book TDY by Doug Valentine, in which he wrote the story of my dad without knowing that he was writing about my dad, because he was recounting the story from a young airman who had been on a very secret mission. And that is the story of TDY in the great book by Doug Valentine. And you can get that on Amazon, by the way. And if you haven't read that, please take advantage of that wonderful book. I don't think I have it right handy. Anyway, you need to get a copy of TDY, and the character in there that he calls what's the detective's name? Mr. Hammer. He calls him Hammer. Well, turns out that that was my dad. So that was what I wanted to talk about, since we had a little time to talk about what's been going on down here on Mystery Island. And I'll be writing some more of the book. I think I'm going to be able to finish the first draft tomorrow and then go back and do a second draft by the time that Andy gets here and we want to start publishing. So things are pretty much on track. And I appreciate everybody's support and bearing with me as I try to do something that I really never wanted to do, but I'm glad I'm doing it. All right. There's yeah. Oh, Professor Hamamoto, you're here. So as you probably already know, the importance of Krulak being in Shanghai and observing the Chinese was he was able to observe the Japanese, and they were using these front opening boats for amphibious landings. Right. Yeah, Mike Hammer. So anyway, the Krulak picked up on what they were doing, and when he was met with or was friends with Higgins down in Alabama, and Higgins and him designed these boats with the front end that would open, and that was the beginning of all the LSTs and LVCPs and all of the other Higgins boat type crafts that they used in the Leyte Gulf landing, also in D-Day, and on all of the, like Hollandia, Biak, many places that Cape Gloucester and New Britain. These won the war, and these were the inventions and the modifications of them by the 7th Fleet, by MacArthur's fleet, as it was called, that Nashville was part of the fleet. They were great at modifying these vessels to fit their needs. And one of the things that I thought was most impressive that I read in Admiral Barby's book, when he was the head of the amphibious portion of the 7th Fleet, and one of the things that I was really impressed with was when they first tried a amphibious landing with these vessels. well, they practiced, and they found that there was a need that the artillery from the big ships wasn't filling, and that is to clear out the jungle real close into the beach, because from a few miles out you could bombard the jungle behind the beach, but you didn't know that you got everybody. And the other thing is that there's so much vegetation there at the edge of the beach that can be deadly to somebody trying to land and run up the beach. So that's where somebody thought of rockets and got some rockets from I can't remember where, but anyway, fixed up a rocket launcher on one of these landing vessels. And so they ended up using these things in the next landing, and it was tremendously successful. So they had, first they'd have the big bombs come in from the guns and of the destroyers and the cruisers, and then they would start these landing craft coming into the shore, and they would get closer and closer to the shore as the bombardment was going on. And then as soon as the bombardment stopped, then they would fire these rockets, and the rockets would arch up way high, of course, and come down and just create a immense conflagration if there's vegetation around, but just basically clearing out that, whatever, a couple hundred yards inside the jungle, it just past the beach, so that by the time the actual troops came to disembark, that they had a clear field of view, and they could see, and probably the Japanese, as they did, would have withdrawn by then under that kind of fire. So that was fascinating to read about how they invented the idea of a rocket launcher on a LCT, a landing craft tank, I think it was. Well, all right, that's enough out of me. Thanks so much for being with me, and thanks, Andy, again for sticking with us. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for another conversation and update with Harley Schlanger of the LaRouche Organization. So I'm looking forward to that. And thanks for being with us. Good night.